And we can move on to our keynotes today, which we are happy to welcome our esteemed guests to give us an overview of what's going on in the world and in Europe regarding labeling of water and energy efficiency. We will first welcome Pierre, the team leader of Sustainable Products Circular Economy Unit in the DG Environment at the European Commission. Pierre joined the European Commission back in '95 at DG Environment as a project officer for the LIFE program, but he also spent a few years on DG Budget, namely working on the Union enlargement in 2004. And upon returning to DG Environment, he was involved in implementing the Environmental Technologies Action Plan, running the Environmental Technology Verification Pilot Program. In 2015, he has been part of the coordination team for the preparation of the new action plan on circular economy, and he's currently the team leader at the unit dedicated to eco-innovation and circular economy. So welcome, Pierre. The screen is yours.
Thank you. And so thank you for the presentations until now and this conference. So I propose to take a step back in the sense that the regulatory framework in the European Commission has changed a bit or is about to change. And that's why I propose to present you this new framework that has been proposed recently. So more specifically, the Commission has adopted on the 20th of March 2022 a package of proposal on circular economy, which includes a proposal for regulation and eco-design for sustainable products. And this is a revision of the Eco-Design Directive, which is in place since 2009. And in the same package, we have adopted a new working plan for the existing Eco-Design Directive and energy labeling from 2022 to 2024, a strategy for sustainable and circular textiles, a revision of the construction products regulation, so also a very important legislation in this field, and a proposal to empower consumers in the green transition, so more on the consumer protection side. So more specifically for today, some words on the Eco-Design Directive and the new framework which is proposed to replace this directive, so the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation. It is based on the current directive, and it should work in the same approach, meaning that the new framework will state the overall frame, the procedures to establish product-specific regulations, and then the product-specific measures will come at a second stage based on secondary legislation, so direct regulations. So what is changing? First, an important scope extension. Currently, the Eco-Design Directive is limited to energy-related products. In future, this will be extended to almost all products, all physical goods, except food and feed. Second change, the possible requirements on products are extended. They cover more largely circularity aspects, so durability, repairability, recyclability. They cover also better aspects of chemicals, substances of concern, and the environmental and carbon footprints of product more largely. Also introduced is the possibility to have an horizontal approach, so to focus on some requirements, but for a larger scope of requirements. And this is an important element to have a more efficient regulatory framework. Finally, an increased focus on product information, and this is important for the discussion today, is that eco-design until now was mainly about minimum requirement, performance requirement. This is kept, and we still have very much focus on performance, but this is completed by more requirement on information, especially a new tool being proposed, which is the digital product passport. Also, new tools to be mentioned in this future framework is the possibility to set mandatory green public procurement. So to require from public authorities, public purchasers to green their purchase based on criteria which are similar or coming from the same assessment as the eco-design. Second, a prevention on the destruction of unsold consumer goods. And finally, more emphasis on the market surveillance and customs control. So the key product aspects under this new regulation are listed here. I won't read them out all, but you see all the main aspects on circularity. I mentioned the presence of substances of concern. Also, you see, along with energy use and energy efficiency, a strong emphasis on resource use and resource efficiency, and this is also important for the discussion today. And emphasis on environmental impact along the whole life cycle through carbon environmental footprint where it makes sense. On information requirement, more specifically, I would like to stress that these requirements are prepared, assessed at the same time as performance requirements. So we will have for each measure a very thorough preparation process, including a wide consultation of stakeholders. And this for both performance requirement, information requirement, and mandatory public procurement requirement where appropriate. This information requirement should systematically include a digital product passport, which I will present in a moment, and information on the presence of substances of concern in the product. So these the chemicals aspect has been given strong emphasis as well. And also new in comparison with the Eco-Design Directive, there is the explicit possibility to require labels, so mandatory labels to inform consumers. When the energy label is used for a specific product, then we will endeavor to use the energy label and complement it with other information wherever possible. But there is also the possibility to create new labels, in particular for products not covered by the energy label. A word on the digital product passport more specifically. So the idea with this passport is to give access through a data carrier on the product itself, which could be a QR code or a barcode, readable, accessible by the consumer and other economic operators, so other businesses along the value chain of the product. And this will give access to a whole stream of information which will be defined in the legislation precising the requirements on the product. And this will include data addressed to consumers, data on the environmental impact, on circularity aspect, on substances of concern. It will also give data more addressed to businesses, in particular to facilitate the reuse, the manufacturing, the recycling of products, and this in view of facilitating the value retention of product along their life cycle. And finally, it will also facilitate the work of market surveillance authorities and customs by giving access to compliance information on the product. So with that, we think that the development of this tool will really make a progress for both consumers and businesses in the implementation of this regulation. And what we expect more specifically of the new regulation, of course, achievement in the environment sectors. So to better achieve EU's environmental goal, the Sustainable Development Goals, to reduce environmental impact related to product. But also we expect benefits for the consumers in terms of improved performance of product, longer lifetimes of product, and more information and financial savings. And as I said, also benefits for chain actors along the supply chain. So I think that with this new framework, that gives a new emphasis on labeling of product for consumers. And in terms of water-related product in particular, these products are part of the new work program starting this year. So the Commission will have a specific assessment of what is being achieved in this field, including voluntary labels like the Unified Water Label, including results of the survey, and that's very welcome to feed into this work, so as to define if more regulation is needed, and in particular more information for consumers and in which form. So thank you for your attention, and I give back the floor to the organizers.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you so much. This overview of the European Union's policies and the roadmap is quite a challenging road ahead for everyone. So we already have some questions in the Q&A box and in the chat. We're recording them for revision, and we'll place them to the speakers at the end of this session. And so we now move to the other side of the world, where we'll listen from a well-established scheme, the WELS system, and from Kirsty Bunfield. Kirsty has she's the General Manager and Regulator of the Water Efficiency and Standards WELS in the Australian government. She has over 25 years experience as a senior public servant, and she has had already a wide range of roles, which include regulation, policy, but also enabling services and IT implementation. She has represented Australia in bilateral engagements and at the G20 regarding Australia's water interests. It was not possible for her to join live today, but we have a video address, and we also have two senior members of her team with us today for the Q&A later, Paul Jung and David Yongnil. So remember, you can keep asking questions in the Q&A box, and we'll select them to pose to our speakers later on.
Thank you for inviting me to share our insights on Australia's experience on implementing a water efficiency labelling program. The Water Efficiency Labelling and Standards Scheme, or WELS for short, was established in 2005 as a national instrument to encourage more efficient domestic water use and reduce demand for potable water by informing consumers about water efficiency at the point of sale. I hold the role of the WELS Regulator in the Australian Government's Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. Today I will give you an overview of our experience and learning in implementing this scheme. The scheme started off as a small voluntary scheme in 1988 in one of our 8 states and territories, led by a local water utility company. It used A ratings as seen in the left-hand side image. The scheme grew slowly with new products being added every few years. During this time, the responsibility for running the scheme moved between government committees, standard-setting bodies, and water utilities. Unfortunately, there was not enough uptake of the scheme by industry. Companies were not registering their products, and consumer awareness and demand for information about water efficiency of products was not yet cultivated. The tipping point came a few years into a long and severe drought in Australia. The drought started in 2001 and lasted until 2009. It devastated many communities, industries, and our environment across large areas of Australia. Water management became a matter of national significance. It led to a reform of water management in Australia, with the Australian government taking the lead on better management of water. Mandating and legislating the WELS scheme in 2005 formed part of that response. From 2005, WELS became a mandatory national scheme under the WELS Act. The objectives of the Act are to conserve water supplies, inform consumers about water efficiency at the point of sale, and to promote innovation and adoption of efficient and effective water-saving technologies. The WELS Act is supported by complementary legislation in each Australian state and territory. This ensures a nationally consistent legal framework across Australia, setting the goals and regulatory functions of the scheme, including powers to monitor and enforce the scheme requirements. This covers the performance requirements for the water consumption of each type of product, how to apply a water efficiency rating, and the water efficiency information that must be shown when the products are offered for sale. It does not include the energy saving for the product as part of the water efficiency. Under the Australian scheme, we regulate taps, showers, toilets, urinals, flow controllers, dishwashers, and washing machines. These are mainly household products. In Australia, that covers around 9.8 million households. While we haven't regulated commercial products, standard taps, toilets, currently we have over 22,000 products registered for the Australian market. If they're not registered and labelled properly and in accordance with the standard, they cannot be offered for sale in Australia. The information about the product's efficiency must also be easily visible to customers. This includes products available in a physical store, as well as those sold online. My team manages the administration, compliance, and enforcement of the scheme and engaging with our many stakeholders, including industry and other governments. There is a growing movement about sustainable living, and on the back of many public awareness campaigns about saving water in the home, the Australian public, as consumers, are recognising and using the WELS scheme to choose efficient products and to save water. A survey last year showed that 69% of respondents recognised the label. The public are demanding more efficient products through their purchasing power. The mandatory standards have also driven innovation in manufacturing over time, and the plumbing and appliances industries acknowledge and support the changes that the scheme is making in saving water. As the scheme has matured and grown in acceptance, it is now relied on by many other programs and has, for example, been integrated into the calculators for sustainable housing and building schemes in Australia. The scheme is also supported and enabled by national building codes, Legislation that requires that all showers, toilets, urinals and taps over a basin must have a minimum water efficiency. For example, 9 litres a minute for showers. And the last point on this slide is that through the WELS Australian standard, we have set the minimum water efficiency for all the products that can be registered for the Australian market. Most importantly, the scheme is working. Reducing the water used means reduced water and water heating bills for the life of the product in homes and in businesses. Based on modelling, the water savings are expected to be 158 gigalitres of water nationally this year, and this is set to increase to 230 gigalitres by 2036. That's worth 1.47 billion Australian dollars this year alone to the Australian economy and to the hip pocket of Australians, and a reduction of 2.3 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalents. The modelling report is available on our website. The modelling is for people connected to utilities, but the savings go further than this. It helps Australians in remote communities who are off the grid and are relying on rainwater, tanks or dams for their water supply to make their water last longer. The image at the top is a tweet from our Minister for the Environment and Water promoting the scheme. You may be interested to know that Australia also has an energy efficiency labelling scheme called the Equipment Energy Efficiency Program. It has a similar regulatory framework, national legislation and product standards about performance and labelling requirements. It currently regulates 22 products and overlaps with WELS labelling for both washing machines and dishwashers. As such, these 2 products have to have both labels displayed on them, like the dishwasher you see in the picture. You can find out more about this scheme on their energy rating website. I would also like to let you know about the new ISO standard for water efficiency labelling programs, the ISO standard 31600-2022. Given that we in Australia recognise that managing the demand for precious water was important globally, we proposed and led the development of this international standard for water efficiency labelling programs. You can find it on the ISO website shown here. We started developing the standard in 2018 and worked with 37 member nations to draft and publish the standard, which was finally published in June this year. The standard is based on schemes that are operating successfully, including our own WELS scheme. This standard sets out 4 key requirements to establish an effective water efficiency labelling scheme, including testing and labelling guidance. It also provides a benchmark for countries with existing water efficiency labelling schemes to assess themselves. But more importantly, the ISO standard provides countries without a scheme with a pathway to establish a water efficiency labelling program that will save them water, energy, and reduce carbon emissions. Thank you for your attention. For more information about the scheme, please visit our website at waterrating.gov.au. You are also welcome to email us or subscribe to our newsletter.
Thank you, Kirsty, for this great presentation. WELS is in fact a great inspiration for us, not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a governance standpoint, how you develop the system from a regional voluntary scheme to a national mandatory system today. So we'll now move on to, actually, we'll move a little back in time, since we are going to quite an earlier time zone to Washington, D.C. in the United States, where we're joined by Stephanie Tanner. Stephanie is the lead engineer in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's WaterSense program. She's responsible for all the technical aspects of development of labeled products, including setting efficiency and performance criteria, as well as managing the certification process. Prior to EPA, Stephanie managed the water efficiency program for federal facilities. Stephanie, welcome, and thank you so much for getting up so early today.
Thank you for having me. Let me share this. It should be. Okay, so well, good day everyone, and it is early here, but I'm happy to be up early. My dog is not happy to be up early. But thank you, Sophia, for inviting me to speak today. I'm really happy to be here to speak to my global colleagues in water efficiency. I'm going to cover some things about the WaterSense program, but there'll be more information in some of my slides that come with the deck later. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is WaterSense and where we started and sort of in how we started. In 2003, the Government Accountability Office in the United States issued a report that said that more than half the states in the country were going to be expecting water shortages in the coming decades. In addition, EPA's own surveys found that there was a lot of infrastructure investment that was needed to the tune of billions of dollars, and there wasn't a good source of where those funds would come from. At the same time, consumers were facing rising water utility bills, and they wanted to do something about it, but they didn't know what exactly to do. And they knew they didn't trust the performance of water efficient products at the time. So this was back in early 2003. In 1992, we had just passed some new laws about water efficiency, and those products were had been performing poorly, and people just continued to feel didn't want to install those products in their homes. To sort of remedy the issue with poor performance, utilities were creating different criteria in each state or even in different cities for water efficient products. And since there wasn't a clear definition of what was water efficient, the criteria could be very wide ranging, and manufacturers were struggling to make products that they could sell in Los Angeles and the rest of California, say, or, just anywhere in the country. And so what they wanted was sort of one unified label in the United States for water efficiency. And so about 100 different organizations, including manufacturers, consumer groups, states, utilities, came to the EPA and asked us to start a water efficiency program. And we started WaterSense in 2006. They came to us because EPA had success with the Energy Star program, which had demonstrated that a label for consumers could improve the availability of efficient products in the marketplace. So WaterSense was founded to sort of make it easier for consumers to identify high-performing water-efficient products and to create what we call an ethic of water efficiency so that consumers would know what to do and they would be able to take positive action to save water. So when we started in 2006, we were lucky that we didn't have to start from scratch. There were other programs that were out there, and but we also could build on the trust that consumers had in EPA as as a provider of environmental information. So we wanted to structure a program that built on that trust. And the biggest obstacle to that was this lingering perception of poor performance. And it had gotten so bad that in the US, there were even episodes of TV shows like Seinfeld that mocked water efficient product performance. And it was a running joke. And so it was just really something that was very important. The problem was that manufacturers had significantly improved the performance of products since the early 90s. But consumers didn't trust that information, and even manufacturers wanted an independent organization to say, hey, these products perform well. So when we started WaterSense, we made product performance a pillar of the label. It also assured that consumers would have confidence in the products that they bought and that they would achieve their intended efficiency and performance, and that consumers would not be required to operate the product more or differently than they had been in the past. And most importantly, it would make sure that the products wouldn't be switched out or changed for other less efficient products because consumers weren't satisfied. The savings would be available to utilities throughout its normal lifespan. And then if utilities had incentivized those products, they would be able to reap those benefits for their product's normal lifespan. So you can see on the left here that I have a slide that sort of talks about the performance of products over time. And so toilets were our first product, and you can see that in 2005 or in the early 2000s, product performance, the red line is the sort of waste clearance, the average waste clearance for a toilet. And you can see that the WaterSense line is set at about 350 grams. And we set that because we looked at studies on toilet loading, and this is sort of what was necessary. And so that's where we set our standard. But toilets are capable of much more than that, as you can see from the red line and the MAP scores. But the MAP score, the MAP test limits the waste clearance to 1,000 grams because they don't want to sort of sacrifice other kinds of performance factors for toilets. But you can see that toilets from 2000 and current toilets perform much better than they did in 2000 when the program started in the early 2000s. And in fact, they perform better than toilets that use a lot more water. So if you look back at toilets that were made in the late 1990s and have 2 or 3 gallons per flush, those use a lot. They don't clear as much waste as modern toilets do. So people really don't have to be concerned about the process for toilets, the performance of toilets anymore. Since WaterSense is a pretty small program, we had set up our system to operate so that we could have a lot more sort of hands in the marketplace. We have 8 staff members, and only one, and that's me, are responsible for doing all the product labeling and conformance assessment, and I manage the conformance program. But we have about 430 manufacturing partners, and we label 8 products in product categories, and we have over 40,000 labeled models. But we manage the program because we have a very good relationship with our 8 certifying bodies and our 3 U.S. accreditors. The certifying bodies issue the label for us, and they manage all the products that are marketed, and they can go anywhere in the world that our products are manufactured. So as a result, from the 100 organizations that came to WaterSense in the early 2000s, we now have over 2,000 partners across manufacturers, retailers, trade associations, and utilities. And so it's a really great program. People are very active in it. And, and I should say that it's a voluntary program. Unlike WELS currently, WaterSense has remained voluntary. And we've been pretty successful that way in the United States, and I don't think there's any move to change that, even though in some states WaterSense has become mandatory, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But now we have almost 40,000 labeled products. When we started, we had fewer than 50 products that met the label, and now in one category, now we have, like I said, almost 40,000 in 8 categories, and that covers both plumbing and irrigation products. But we're working on products in reverse osmosis systems for homes and looking at leak detection and then some more irrigation equipment. And even though we are a US program, we have manufacturers across North America and around the world. Just under half of our manufacturers are from outside the United States, and about 10% are located in Europe. So because we have these clear standards, it's even led new companies to successfully enter the market. And our focus on performance-based criteria has helped, I think, foster significant technological innovation and improvements to both efficiency and performance. And one example I like to cite is that when we started our label for weather-based irrigation controllers, there were a number of manufacturers in the market that had been in the irrigation space for a long time. But when the specification came out, some company in the tech industry felt like they could make that product, and they came into the market, and they're one of the largest manufacturers of WaterSense labeled products today. So they didn't even exist before the specification was published, and now they've come into the market. They sell a lot of product, and they've actually moved the products from being a system designed for irrigation professionals to operate on homes to something that you as a homeowner can operate using your cell phone. So it's been a pretty significant change in technology. And When we started, there were about 14 models that met our criteria, and now there's over 700 labeled irrigation controllers in the marketplace today. So as the program has grown in terms of products, we've also been able to increase our influence with both standards and green building programs. We participate on the standards committees that govern all of our products, and where possible, we have test methods that are standardized and often included in the national standard, and that makes it easier for states and green building programs and model codes to reference the WaterSense criteria. We've been able to translate a lot of our work from these standards committees to work with whole building committees, and WaterSense is also referenced or included as a criteria in a number of green building standards and green building programs. And as I said before, we have lots of states now that are starting to require WaterSense labeled products to be sold in their states. Now that, you know, a lot of these programs are international, we were really happy to participate in the new ISO standard that Kirsty mentioned in her remarks. So WaterSense is one of the standards that's listed in there, along with our Energy Star program, which I should mention labels dishwashers and clothes washers for both water and energy efficiency. Although the goal of the program was product labeling, we did realize quickly that we would need a broader perspective if we wanted to create this ethic of water efficiency. And so now we use more of a three-pronged approach with programs for products like I've talked about, and practices like helping people achieve better water efficient behaviors in their homes and businesses. And then we also have some other certifications for people. We've developed certification programs for whole homes, as Philippa Newton mentioned, and that includes whole homes, new homes constructed, major renovation of homes, and even homes in multifamily buildings. We also have criteria certifications for irrigation professionals. We publish best practices for commercial and institutional buildings, and we have a wide range of outreach materials for consumers and water industry professionals. So what has all that brought to American consumers? So we've been able, for a really small program, we've been able to achieve what I like to think of as pretty significant results. We've saved 6.4 trillion gallons of water, and I was supposed to translate that into liters, but I didn't, so sorry. But luckily, our greenhouse gas savings are in metric tons, so you can figure that out. But we, even though the focus is on water efficiency, we calculate savings from all of these other in energy and greenhouse gas savings, because as everybody knows, there's a significant amount of energy embedded in water use from heating, pumping, and treatment. And in the United States, it's possible to pump that water very long distances, like water from the Colorado, which is in the central United States, provides water to states all throughout the West. California pumps water over mountain ranges. And so there's a lot of energy embedded in water use in some of our states. We also calculate utility bill savings, but I should note that from our original consumer surveys, most people were less interested in the water dollar savings, because in a lot of places, water used to be fairly inexpensive in the United States. But it's the dollar savings don't really drive the purchases or the saving of water. Most people were more concerned about just saving the water, because we think that it's because they have a closer relationship to their body of water. Most people live near their local bodies of water. They use their local bodies of water, and they want to protect those bodies of water. And so they, since they have that relationship, they're really more interested in saving the water just because for the water's sake. In addition, we had an internal audit of the program a few years ago, and that showed that for every dollar that is spent on the program, because it's entirely funded by taxpayer dollars, that we provide about $1,000 in value to consumers. So all of our program impacts are calculated from shipment data that manufacturers report to us every year. So all of these numbers are from 2021, which was the last full year we've collected data. The model uses typical usage and stock replacement to generate the savings data, and I provided a little bit more information on that. There's a link to the data page on our website on the last slide. So even though we've had a lot of success, I think there's still a lot of challenges, and there's a lot more to be done. Unfortunately, we found that the perception of poor performance lingers, especially for products, plumbing products. There's still a need to increase our messaging on product performance and to even try to improve product performance across some product categories. But WaterSense does not have a lot of funding for direct outreach campaigns, so we rely mostly on our manufacturers and word of mouth of consumers that are happy with our products. I should also say that, you know, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. That even though you can see that drought is continuing, so I have two maps here that show drought from 2007 in the United States when we started, and the map looks pretty similar to drought today in the United States. So it's a continuing problem. Water scarcity remains a problem, or even a growing problem in much of the United States. And so that means there's still a lot of importance for water efficiency, and so we're still working hard. But I think what's interesting is that water use is starting to decline a little bit in the United States. So I think we use a lot more water per capita than is used in Europe, mostly because in a lot of the country we do a lot of outdoor irrigation. And so that can be the largest percentage of water used in homes and even in, well, not so much in businesses, but definitely in homes. Most people irrigate. And so if you look in Western utilities, they're really focusing their efforts on getting people to irrigate less outside. On the bright side, we did another survey just last year on consumer satisfaction and consumer opinions about water efficiency, and consumers still look to the EPA for credible information. And then one of the really great things is that when they make a WaterSense purchase, they remain loyal to the brand, and that loyalty helps us translate into other products. And so we're hoping that people will find the product, use it, and have good interactions with it, and then that'll help lead them to purchase other products with the label on it. So there's a lot of information on our website on details about how the program operates. Thank you again for inviting me, and happy to answer any questions when we get to the Q&A.
Thank you, Stephanie. This is always great insight, and the way that you managed to make the scheme so mainstreamed, even though it's a voluntary scheme, it's quite interesting and quite an inspiration for us as well. So we don't have a lot of time for questions, but let's take the opportunity. We had a couple in the Q&A box. So one regarding still the consumer survey for Philippa and for Vanessa, which was from Philip Selwood from the Energy Saving Trust in the UK, asking, should manufacturers be editing the choice of appliances in the marketplace to help sustainable choices? So Philippa and Vanessa, I don't know which one of you wants to address this.
I can start. We have some experience with the European Energy Label. This label has influenced the market when it became mandatory. We see an evolution on the efficiency class of efficiency rate, of the machines. So we know it has influence. I'm not sure if it should be mandatory or not. That's a question of opinion, I think. Philippa, do you want to add something?
No. I think that I think EnR has a question also regarding these presentations that we just heard from Stephanie and Kirsty, and that might help also for to discuss on this discussion on this topic.
Yeah, so we had a previous one from Sophie Cartier. She asks for Pierre-Henri, does the label integrate how water energy efficient the company is in manufacturing the product? So before point of sale, yeah. Not sure if Pierre is up.
Yes.
There he is.
Yes, I'm still you. I'm not sure exactly what label the question refers to, because for the moment there is no mandatory label on taps and showers or water-related product at EU level. Water label is voluntary industry initiative, but it's not, doesn't come from when we assess possible labels, the future legislation, we look at all possibilities. So label the use phase, the use, for example, in the use phase, but we could also include indicators the whole life cycle, and that would cover impact of action as well. But all this is potential, because for there is such assessment that it's only yes.
Yeah, true. From the several options usually are more, of course, more prominent information regards use and not the actual production of the products, which is true that can have an effect, but due to the time of use of usually many years, it should be diluted there. But it's true that it's a question that should be addressed as well. We also have a question here from.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
What you say on the current energy labeling, the energy labels use phase and the use phase current.
Yes. Thank you, Pierre. And we have a question from Inês Mendes from the Portuguese Energy Agency, both for WELS and water sands. So being a mandatory and a voluntary scheme, you probably both have equated in both countries the option of becoming otherwise voluntary or mandatory with advantages and disadvantages for both. Could you both provide an insight into those options and how, if you weigh them? Maybe we can start by WELS, Paul Jung or David Youngnil.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that in our presentation, that when WELS became in its infancy, it was a voluntary scheme, and one of those issues that we had at that time was that the uptake of the scheme didn't reach a threshold that drove the industry to adopt it in a higher rate. So it was about sort of looking at a way to help incentivize the scheme, and without, in a voluntary sense, there's not necessarily the government or money to support promotion of the scheme. So I think moving away from a voluntary scheme over to a mandatory scheme sort of helped to ensure there was money that was recovered through the regulation of the scheme to then put back into promoting the scheme and encouraging its use and broader knowledge and understanding in the consumer market to help drive that innovation and for more water efficient products.
Yeah, Paul, that's a great experience coming from the voluntary to the mandatory that you can provide. What about you, Stephanie? How did WaterSense equate the option of becoming mandatory at a point?
No, I think in the United States, there's a resistance to having a lot of mandatory requirements. So we were always designed to be voluntary, and I don't think there's any discussion at the federal level that will move to a mandatory program. But I do think that we've achieved some regulatory aims in just having the voluntary program. One of the things that happened was the manufacturers just found it was just less expensive to retool and sell faucets that only met our level in the United States. And I should say that WaterSense is a single tier scheme. So there's only one rate and there's a lot of products below that and, you know, obviously nothing, and only the federal standard above it. And so, you know, so now, for instance, the federal standard is 2.2 gallons per minute for faucets or taps, but it's very hard to find a product that's higher than 1.5 gallons per minute for a tap in the United States, because most manufacturers decided that it didn't make sense to make that anymore, and they just sell the 1.5. And so I think as retailers have started to switch over, like Home Depot only sells WaterSense labeled products in their stores. So I think it's just harder and harder to find other kinds of products. And I think it's just sort of becoming sort of a de facto national standard without having to make it sort of mandatory. And so I think we're going to be happy staying that way.
So I think we can all agree that there's no global solution to this, and it really has to be tailored to the individual reality of each country. But definitely, this is a good point that you can have a good success with both a mandatory and a voluntary scheme, and in fact adoption can be achieved in both ways through different means and channels. So thank you so much. We don't have a lot of time. We could I think we could stay just on these questions for a few more hours, but we could certainly discuss it for the entire morning. But